The sun was just beginning to lift over the jagged Arizona mesas when Nathaniel Loma tightened the cinch on his bay stallion and reminded himself again that today was supposed to bring peace into his life, not adventure, not chaos, and certainly not the kind of whirlwind woman his cousins always teased him about attracting. No, today he was riding out to bring home the kind of bride every rancher dreamed of. Calm, polite, soft-spoken, steady as a church pew on Sunday morning. That's what the matchmaker had promised. A teacher from Santa Fe, she had written. Refined, quiet, a woman who values stability. Exactly the kind of wife Nathaniel believed he needed if he was going to rebuild his late father's ranch and restore order to his life. He repeated that to himself like a prayer while the desert wind whispered through the sagebrush. A calm wife. That was the plan. But the Creator must have been laughing, because as Nathaniel rode toward the dusty stagecoach stop outside Silver Butte, he heard trouble long before he saw it. A woman's voice, loud, bright, and absolutely unafraid, rang out over the clatter of hooves. "I told you, sir, that mule didn't buck because of me. It bucked because you've been feeding it stale oats." Nathaniel slowed his horse. That did not sound like a calm, quiet teacher. When he rounded the bend, he found the stage stop in full commotion. The driver, red-faced and sweating, was waving his arms. A pile of luggage lay scattered in the dirt, and standing in the middle of it, hands on her hips, hair blazing like copper fire in the morning sun, was Mara Sullivan. She wore boots caked in trail dust, a skirt ripped at the seam from some earlier misadventure, and an expression that said she had already survived half the West and dared it to try something else. Nathaniel blinked. His throat went dry. His very sensible, very quiet plans began to tremble. This woman was not calm. She was electric. Before he could speak, Mara turned, noticed him, and brightened as if she greeted a long-lost friend. "You must be Nathaniel Loma," she called cheerfully. Perfect timing. "Do you know anything about stubborn men or stubborn mules? Because I'm up to my neck in both." The driver sputtered. Nathaniel, caught between amusement and confusion, swung off his horse. "I know horses," he said carefully. "Good," she replied, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "Because that mule nearly flipped the whole coach, and this gentleman seems convinced it's somehow my fault for breathing too loudly near it." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow at the driver, who immediately muttered something about women with opinions and stomped away. Mara grinned triumphantly. Nathaniel felt something in his chest shift like a horse testing a new rein. He reached for her trunk, attempting to recover his original plan. "The matchmaker said you were a teacher." "I am," she said proudly. "Reading, writing, numbers, a little frontier geography. But I never promised I was quiet." She said it with such unapologetic honesty that Nathaniel almost forgot how to speak. He lifted her trunk onto his horse. It was heavier than it looked. "What's in here?" he asked. "Books," she replied. "And a few frying pans, and maybe a hammer." "A hammer?" "You never know what needs fixing." Nathaniel almost smiled. Almost. The ride back to his ranch became an unexpected education. Mara asked questions about everything: the mesas, the rivers, the wildlife, the Apache names for constellations. She listened intently, but with a spark in her eyes that made it clear she wasn't content to simply learn. She wanted to experience. At one point she said softly, "Your land is beautiful." "It feels alive." Nathaniel's chest warmed at that. Most newcomers only saw dust. She saw life. But then she added brightly, "I hope you don't mind, but I'm not very good at sitting still. I'll help on the ranch however you need. Horses, fields, fixing fences, I'm game." Nathaniel inhaled sharply. "Help on the ranch? Fix fences? Ride horses?" Where was the calm, soft-spoken schoolteacher he'd prepared himself for? He looked at her again, sunlight dancing off her hair, her boots tapping eagerly against the stirrup. No. Mara Sullivan wasn't calm. She was wind and wildfire and warm laughter. And even though Nathaniel didn't know it yet, his life, quiet, orderly, predictable, was about to be ridden straight into a dawn he'd never forget. The first hour at the Loma Ranch proved something Nathaniel should have known the moment he saw her at the stage. Stop. Mara Sullivan did not enter a place quietly. She arrived, loud as a sunrise rooster and twice as energetic. Nathaniel hadn't even finished helping her down from his horse before she spotted the corral and gasped, "Is that a Mustang? Oh, he's gorgeous." And before he could warn her that the Mustang was half wild and barely halter broke, she was already halfway across the yard, skirts flying like a flag in high wind. Nathaniel's cousin Eli paused mid-swing with a pitchfork. "Is that your bride?" he whispered, wide-eyed. Nathaniel muttered, "Apparently," in a tone that carried equal parts disbelief and reluctant admiration. Mara reached the corral fence and leaned forward, clicking her tongue softly. The Mustang lifted his head, nostrils flaring. Instead of stepping back, she smiled slow, patient, fearless, and extended her hand. "He won't bite," she said, sensing Nathaniel approach behind her. "He might," Nathaniel countered. Mara laughed. "So might I if someone fed me stale oats." Nathaniel couldn't help it. He chuckled, a sound that felt rusty from disuse. But while he was still recovering from that unplanned moment of amusement, his day took another surprising turn. Because Mara didn't just love horses. She loved everything about ranch life. Within minutes, she had complimented the foreman's saddle stitching, offered to help repair a loose corral board, and asked if she could learn to rope just a little, not enough to embarrass myself. Nathaniel realized quickly that Mara didn't just fail to fit the mold, she shattered it. He had prepared himself for someone who would prefer knitting indoors, or reading by lamplight, or making polite conversation with neighbors. Instead, he got a woman who wanted to race tumbleweeds, who asked how fast a woman could saddle a horse if she really tried, who believed chores were adventures disguised as responsibilities. Still, Nathaniel attempted, at least at first, to steer her gently toward calmer tasks. "Mara," he said as she reached for a heavy water bucket, "you don't need to." "Oh, hush," she interrupted, lifting it herself. "I grew up hauling pails from a frozen well in winter. A little Arizona heat is nothing." Nathaniel blinked. She didn't boast. She didn't compete. She simply lived with a fierce, straightforward joy that both unsettled and captivated him. Later that afternoon, he found her sitting in the shade of the cottonwoods with a notebook on her lap and several ranch children gathered around her. She had already begun teaching them their letters, using sticks to draw in the dust, making. The children roar with laughter as she compared a crooked B to a mule's wobbly back legs. Nathaniel watched from a distance. This, at least, matched what the matchmaker promised, a teacher with a gentle heart. But then Mara looked up, caught him watching, and waved him over so enthusiastically that a few children toppled sideways from laughing. "Nathaniel," she said, "did you know your sky has more colors than any book ever taught me? Look, they're purple, gold, a little green. Does it always look like it's on fire?" His chest tightened unexpectedly. She talked about his homeland like it was a wonder, not a hardship. He realized then she wasn't simply energetic. She was present, fully, wholeheartedly present in every moment. And the land responded. The children adored her. The foreman shook his head but smiled every time she spoke. Even the half-wild Mustang watched her with something like curiosity. But Nathaniel felt something else, a tug inside him, a quiet pull. Like a horse beginning to trust new hands on the reins. At supper, she told stories from her journey. Towns where snow fell sideways, a preacher who snored louder than thunder, a girl who tried to trade a kitten for a book. Nathaniel listened to spite himself. Mara didn't speak just to fill silence. She spoke to bring others into her world. And somehow, without even trying, she had already become part of his. But later that night, as he walked her to the small guest room she'd use until the wedding, she gave him a look soft, searching, and said quietly, "I know I'm not what you expected, Nathaniel, but I hope I can be someone good for your life." He opened his mouth, but for once the calm, steady rancher found no words, because the truth was simple. She wasn't what he expected, but she might be exactly what his quiet life needed. The next morning, Nathaniel awoke to the sound of clattering pans, horses snorting, and Mara Sullivan singing loudly and not exactly in tune. He rubbed his eyes and sighed. So much for calm mornings. At breakfast, Mara had already organized the chickens, milked the cow, and attempted to teach the foreman a new way to hang the laundry to avoid sun damage. She hummed a tune he didn't recognize, occasionally breaking into a laugh at her own jokes. Nathaniel watched from his chair, fork frozen midway to his mouth. This was overwhelming. "You're not eating," Mara observed, tilting her head with curiosity. "I'm just observing," he admitted. "I wasn't expecting quite this much energy." She grinned. "Energy is what keeps a ranch running. If you move too slowly, the horses get restless, the cattle scatter, and the land grows bored." Nathaniel blinked. He had to admit she had a point, but he had prepared himself for quiet. Calm mornings, polite conversation, gentle smiles. Not this. Whirlwind of fire and activity. By mid-morning, Mara had discovered a loose fence post near the back pasture. Before Nathaniel could stop her, she grabbed a hammer and went to work, humming as the nails went in crookedly but efficiently. "Maybe let me," he started, but she looked up at him, eyes bright with determination. "Nathaniel, I'm fine. I may be a bit wild, but I know what I'm doing." And she did. The post was secured firmly, if not perfectly straight, and the horses seemed calmer once the fence stood. Still, Nathaniel felt the tug of unease. Mara's spirit was undeniable, but he worried. What if she didn't know when to stop? What if her energy caused trouble? Later, Mara overheard a neighbor whispering to the foreman, "She's too wild. Too loud. That's no way to keep a wife." For a moment, her confident facade faltered. She looked down at her hands, twisted the hem of her skirt, and asked softly, "Nathaniel, am I too much?" Nathaniel paused. The words struck him harder than a sudden hailstorm. He had never seen her like this, vulnerable, unsure. He realized then that he had been so focused on wanting a calm bride that he hadn't considered her feelings. "No," he said finally, kneeling beside her. "You're not too much. You're you. And that's exactly who I want to be with." Mara looked up surprised. "Even if I don't fit your expectations?" Nathaniel smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Especially because you don't fit them." A breeze rustled through the cottonwoods, carrying the scent of desert sage and distant mountains. It felt like a lesson delivered by the land itself. Life in the West wasn't neat or predictable. Horses would bolt. Storms would hit. Good people, would surprise you. And the right kind of partnership wasn't about controlling the unexpected. It was about embracing it. Mara relaxed, her shoulders dropping for the first time that morning. She realized Nathaniel's words were more than reassurance, they were permission. Permission to be herself, without shrinking to fit someone else's vision. By noon, the ranch hummed with life. Mara riding alongside Nathaniel as he checked the fences, laughing as a calf stumbled after its mother, calling out lessons to the children, and asking endless questions about the land and horses. Nathaniel noticed the subtle changes in himself as well. His chest felt lighter, his step less rigid. Her wildness wasn't chaos, it was energy, curiosity, and courage. It challenged him, yes, but it also reminded him why he loved the land, the horses, and now. By sunset, Nathaniel and Mara sat on the porch, watching the sky bleed orange and purple over the mesas. I thought I wanted calm, Nathaniel admitted quietly. But now, I'm not so sure. Maybe I needed this someone to remind me life isn't just about stillness. Mara leaned her head on his shoulder, smiling. And maybe I needed someone who believes in me, even when I get a little too loud. They stayed like that as the stars blinked awake, the desert humming beneath them. The land didn't demand quiet, it demanded attention, respect, and heart. And together, they were learning how to give it all. That night, Mara slept peacefully in her new room, not because she had calmed herself to fit expectations, but because Nathaniel had learned to accept her. And Nathaniel slept better than he had in months. Not because everything was orderly, but because he had realized the best things in life often arrive wild. Unplanned and wholly alive. It was the kind of evening that promised calm. The desert sun dipped low, painting the mesas in gold and rose. And Nathaniel thought he might finally enjoy a quiet night with Mara settling in at the ranch. But the West had other plans. The first warning came as a distant rumble of thunder. Mara, ever curious, tilted her head skyward. "That doesn't sound like the usual storm," she said. "We should check the herd." Nathaniel hesitated. A calm night was exactly what he had planned. But Mara's sharp gaze left little room for argument. Together they saddled up, the wind already picking up across the plains. Dark clouds rolled in, fast, jagged, and alive. The smell of rain and ozone filled the air, and somewhere in the distance, the cattle stirred restlessly. Before they even reached the corral, the herd had sensed the storm and panicked. Horses whinnied, calves bolted, and the air filled with dust and chaos. Nathaniel's heart hammered. "Mara, it's too dangerous, stay close." But Mara didn't wait. With fearless precision, she spurred her horse into the fray, moving among the animals with a grace and instinct Nathaniel had never seen. He followed, yelling instructions, but Mara's calm authority over the chaos was astonishing. She guided the mustangs and calves, speaking softly to them, her hands steady on reins and ropes, her eyes bright with focus. Lightning split the sky. A sudden gust knocked dust and debris into their faces. Nathaniel grabbed Mara's arm to steady her for a second, and their eyes met. In that moment, all pretenses fell away. There was no quiet bride and no strict rancher. There was only the land, the storm, and the two of them moving as one, fighting to save the herd from disaster. "Here," Mara called, pointing to a narrow canyon opening. "Drive them this way. Slow, steady, don't scatter." Nathaniel nodded, trusting her instinct over his own caution. Slowly, deliberately, they guided the horses into the canyon, their own horses straining against the wind. The calves stumbled, the mustangs kicked, but Mara's voice and movements were calm and commanding. By the time the storm passed, the first hints of dawn were breaking across the desert. Dust settled. The herd was safe. Both Nathaniel and Mara were drenched, muddy, and exhausted, but exhilarated. They dismounted near a rocky outcrop, breathing heavily. Mara laughed a short, sharp sound full of relief. Well, that was more than a little exciting. Nathaniel, chest still pounding, shook his head. Exciting doesn't cover it. That was dangerous. She looked at him, eyes shining with adrenaline and pride. And we did it. Together. For a long moment, Nathaniel was silent, letting the words sink in. Together. All the lessons of the day and the days before aligned in his mind. Life on the frontier was unpredictable. The land, the animals, even people, they couldn't be controlled. And the calm he had sought in a quiet bride? It didn't matter. Peace didn't come from stillness. Peace came from trust, cooperation, and respect. Nathaniel turned to Mara, suddenly aware of the warmth of her hand brushing his, the mud streaked across her face, the wild spark in her eyes. Maybe I didn't need calm, he said quietly. Mara tilted her head, smiling softly, letting the early sunlight catch her hair. Maybe not. Maybe you needed someone who rides beside you through the storm without fear. He felt a grin tug at his lips. He had spent so long preparing for the wrong kind of life. Now he realized the life worth having wasn't calm. It was alive. They walked their horses back to the ranch as dawn stretched across the horizon, painting the desert in brilliant amber and rose. The barn smelled of wet hay. The children and foreman peeked out from the porch, blinking sleep from their eyes, astonished at the sight of the two riders returning from a night that could have ended in disaster. Nathaniel and Mara dismounted and shared a quiet laugh, the kind that builds trust, comfort, and understanding. Mara looked at him, muddy face radiant with wild energy, and he knew that this partnership, this life together, was exactly what he had been missing. The storm had passed. But in its wake, Nathaniel realized he had found something far more valuable than calm. He had found a woman whose spirit challenged him, inspired him, and rode beside him through every uncertainty the frontier could throw at them. And that, he decided, was the only kind of life worth living. The morning after the storm, the Loma Ranch lay in a quiet, almost miraculous calm. The sky was clear, the herd safe, and the desert breeze carried the subtle scent of wet sage. For the first time in days, Nathaniel had a moment to breathe. He found Mara sitting on the porch steps, her boots dusty, her hair still damp, notebook in hand. She was sketching the landscape, jotting down observations of the storm's effects on the canyon and the pastures. Nathaniel watched her for a moment. She looked alive, completely herself, and utterly fearless. He realized something then. He had spent so long trying to mold his expectations of a wife that he hadn't considered what she might truly bring to his life. Mara, he began slowly, unsure how to phrase what he felt about yesterday, about everything. I think I've been wrong. She looked up, curious but cautious. I thought I wanted a calm wife. Someone quiet, gentle, someone who wouldn't disrupt my life or my work, he said, his gaze distant, reflecting the morning light. But you're not quiet. You're not gentle in the way I imagined. And for the longest time, I thought that was a problem. Mara tilted her head, listening. But yesterday, with the storm, with the herd, I realized something important, Nathaniel continued. The calm I wanted wasn't real peace. It was control. And control isn't the same as understanding, or respect, or love. Mara's eyes softened. She nodded, waiting for him to continue. You didn't need to change, he said. I don't want you to shrink yourself to fit what I thought a bride should be. I see now that life on the frontier isn't about keeping someone contained. It's about partnership, trust, accepting each other as we are. Mara's lips curved into a small smile. She closed her notebook and leaned back on her hands. I've been worried, she admitted quietly. I thought maybe my energy, my wildness, would push you away. I tried to act quieter to fit the image of what you expected, but it felt wrong. And I could feel the land, the horses, even the children. They responded to me when I was myself. Nathaniel reached out and gently took her hand. The warmth of her skin grounded him, reminded him of why he had brought her to the ranch in the first place. You're right, he said softly. We can't control life or each other. We can only trust it and trust each other. And I trust you, Mara, completely. She looked at him, a mixture of relief and joy in her eyes. And I trust you, Nathaniel. even when I think I might be too much for this ranch. For this life?" He smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. The lesson wasn't just about Mara, it was about him, too. He had spent years trying to impose order on his world, believing that peace came from stillness and obedience. But the West didn't work that way. Horses ran wild, storms came without warning. And people good, strong people came with energy. Spirit and opinions. True harmony, he realized, came from acceptance, respect, and working together through the chaos. The children, noticing the quiet understanding between the two, gathered nearby, whispering excitedly about the couple who rode through the storm. Even the foreman, stoic and usually silent, gave a small nod of approval. Mara's influence on the ranch, Nathaniel realized, was not just in her energy, it was in her ability to inspire confidence and cooperation in everyone around her. By mid-morning, they were back to work, not because it was expected, but because they wanted to be side by side, building a life that balanced freedom with responsibility. Mara helped check fences, Nathaniel guided the horses, and together they laughed over minor mishaps, a fence board swinging too far, a calf refusing to follow the herd, learning to communicate not with authority or control, but with mutual respect and patience. When the sun dipped low again, casting long shadows over the mesas, Nathaniel realized he had never felt more at peace. Not because everything was calm, but because he had learned the West's most important lesson. Happiness isn't about changing someone to fit your expectations. It's about embracing them as they are and riding the storms of life together. Mara leaned against his shoulder, and he felt the steady warmth of her presence. For the first time, Nathaniel understood. He didn't need a quiet bride. He needed someone who challenged him, inspired him, and shared the ride wild, untamed, and utterly alive. And Mara? She didn't just fit into his life. She completed it. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of dust, sagebrush, and distant pine from the northern mesas. Nathaniel had barely finished breakfast when a rider approached the ranch on a fast horse, dust trailing behind like a storm cloud. The man dismounted abruptly, tipping his hat in a formal, practiced way. "Nathaniel Loma?" he called. "Cattle baron in these parts. Name's Clayton Harrow. I've come to discuss your land." Nathaniel's brow furrowed. Harrow was notorious in the territory, wealthy, stubborn, and ruthless. He'd been trying to push smaller ranchers off their property for years. "I don't sell," Nathaniel said firmly. Harrow's smile was sharp, almost predatory. Now, let's not be hasty. You understand the law, I assume. You can't hold this land without proper water rights, and well, you wouldn't want trouble, would you?" Trouble. That word sparked fire in Mara's chest. She had been listening from the porch, her notebook forgotten, eyes narrowing. Without waiting for Nathaniel to respond, she strode forward. "I don't think you understand," Mara said, her voice steady, yet carrying an authority Nathaniel hadn't heard from her before. "Nathaniel owns this land. He's followed every law, every regulation. And the people of this county, your neighbors, know it." Harrow raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by her audacity. "And who's this?" "I'm Mara Sullivan," she said, stepping closer. "I may be a schoolteacher, but I'm also someone who believes in fairness and proper documentation. If you want to challenge Nathaniel, we'll make sure the courts see the facts. Your threats mean nothing without proper evidence." Nathaniel felt his pulse quicken. Mara had turned from the spirited bride he admired into a formidable partner, ready to defend not just him, but the land they had worked so hard to maintain. Harrow laughed a cold, dismissive sound. "A woman in a bonnet thinks she can handle me. How quaint." Mara didn't flinch. Instead, she called for Nathaniel's foreman and the townsfolk she had befriended. By mid-afternoon, the ranch house yard was buzzing with neighbors, teachers, and workers, all armed with petitions, ledgers, and notarized water rights documents. Mara organized them with precision, delegating tasks, verifying signatures, and ensuring that every claim was backed by evidence. Nathaniel watched, awestruck. This was the woman he had been learning to love, not just fiery and courageous, but intelligent, resourceful, and fearless when it mattered most. By sunset, Harrow had exhausted every threat he could muster and realized that Nathaniel's land was untouchable. Frustrated, he left, muttering under his breath, but Mara's victory was complete. The townsfolk cheered quietly for her, not for a teacher, but for a leader who had used brains, courage, and integrity to protect their community. That night, the ranch was alive with quiet celebration. The air smelled of cooked meat and campfire smoke. Children ran about recounting the day's events, and Nathaniel finally allowed himself a moment of reflection. Mara approached him, brushing dirt from her boots. "I just couldn't stand by while someone tried to take what's ours," she said softly. "You've done so much to keep this place running. I wanted to help." Nathaniel took her hands in his. "You didn't just help. You saved us. And not just the land, you reminded me that courage isn't just physical. It's using your mind, your voice, your heart in the face of danger. That's what makes someone truly strong." Mara smiled, leaning into him. "Well, I guess the West teaches lessons whether you like them or not." Nathaniel chuckled, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. "Yes, but this one I'll never forget." Later, as they sat on the porch under a canopy of stars, Nathaniel realized something profound. Mara's bravery wasn't reckless. It was thoughtful, informed, and rooted in respect for the land and people she loved. She had proven that partnership wasn't just about shared chores or affection. It was about standing together, protecting each other, and making the right choices even when fear was present. The storm of the past days, the physical storm with the herd, and the metaphorical one with Harrow had passed. What remained was a strengthened bond between two people who had learned to trust each other, accept one another fully, and embrace life with all its challenges. Nathaniel took Mara's hand in his, feeling a steady warmth. For the first time, he understood the true meaning of partnership: to face storms together, to rely on each other's strengths, and to celebrate victories as one. The West had tested them, and together they had risen stronger. The morning after the confrontation with Harrow arrived like a promise across the Arizona mesas. Golden light spilled over the canyons, illuminating the ranch in warm, forgiving tones. Nathaniel had risen early, hoping to enjoy a quiet ride before the day's work began, but Mara had other ideas. "Race you to the ridge," she called, already straddling her horse, hair escaping from her bonnet in a fiery halo. Nathaniel blinked, caught between exasperation and amusement. "Mara, it's barely sunrise." She grinned. "All the better. Sunlight makes everything faster." Before he could protest, she spurred her horse forward. Nathaniel, hard hammering, followed, laughter bubbling from his chest despite himself. The horses kicked up dust, hooves pounding the dry earth, and the cool morning wind whistled around them. For the first time in weeks, Nathaniel felt entirely free, not just from danger or responsibility, but from the expectations he had once imposed on himself and others. Mara was beside him, alive and untamed, and he realized that trying to mold her into a quiet, proper bride would have been a mistake. She wasn't meant to fit the mold. She was meant to challenge, inspire, and ride beside him. As they galloped over the ridge, the desert stretching endlessly in front of them. Mara laughed, a sound that seemed to blend perfectly with the thrum of their horses' hooves. Nathaniel matched her pace, feeling exhilaration and peace coexisting in the same heartbeat. When they reached the top, the wind blowing fiercely across their faces. Mara reined in her horse and looked at him with sparkling eyes. "You see it, Nathaniel? All of it?" she asked, gesturing to the vast sunlit land, the herd grazing below, and the distant mesas glowing pink in the morning light. He nodded, chest swelling. "Yes, all of it. And now I understand peace isn't silence. Peace is this: balance, trust, and riding it together." Mara's smile softened. "I couldn't ask for a better partner." Nathaniel reached over, brushing a lock of hair from her face, letting the warmth of her presence sink into him. "Nor I," he admitted. "I wanted calm, Mara, but now I know calm isn't the goal. Happiness isn't about taming the wild. It's about finding someone whose spirit complements yours." She laughed softly. "Then I suppose I'm perfect for this ranch." He chuckled, squeezing her hand gently. Perfect indeed. They spent the rest of the morning riding along the mesas, checking fences, calling to the herd, and teaching each other tricks: how to spot water under dry riverbeds, how to anticipate a Mustang's sudden shift, how to balance strength with patience. Every movement was a lesson, every glance a reassurance. By noon, they returned to the ranch house, the smell of breakfast wafting through the air. The children and foreman watched them approach, clearly impressed by the sight of the two riders partners in work, in life, and in spirit. Mara waved to the children, who cheered at her daring ride. Nathaniel allowed himself a proud, quiet smile. In the afternoon, Mara sat on the porch with her notebook, sketching and jotting down observations. Nathaniel joined her, leaning against the railing beside her. The silence was comfortable, a different kind of harmony from the stormy chaos of the days before. "You know," he said, breaking the quiet, "I think the land taught us something important. The West doesn't reward control. It rewards respect, courage, and partnership." Mara nodded, pen poised over the page. "Exactly. You can't demand obedience from the land or from people. You work with it. You adapt. And sometimes you ride beside it through the storms and come out stronger." Nathaniel smiled, letting her words sink in. "I think we've learned that lesson together." Mara glanced at him, a soft light in her eyes. "I wouldn't want to learn it with anyone else." For the first time, Nathaniel truly understood that their partnership wasn't just about survival or practical work. It was about shared trust, respect, and the joy of companionship. They didn't need to fit a traditional mold. They didn't need to conform to others' expectations. They simply needed to ride side by side, facing whatever the West and life threw at them. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the mesas in shades of amber and rose, Nathaniel took Mara's hand in his, holding it gently. "I wanted a calm bride," he murmured, "but the West gave me something better. It gave me you. Wild, brave, unafraid, and entirely perfect." Mara laughed softly, leaning into his shoulder. "And I got the best partner I could ever imagine." Together, they watched the sunset, the land stretching endlessly before them, knowing that no storm, literal or metaphorical, could ever break the bond they had forged. The West had tested them, challenged them, and taught them. And in its vast, untamed beauty, Nathaniel and Mara had found not just partnership, but happiness, trust, and a love that would ride beside them through every dawn to come. The Loma Ranch had finally settled into a rhythm that felt less like survival and more like life, the kind of life Nathaniel had never imagined possible. When he first wished for a quiet bride, Mara, still spirited, still wild in all the ways that had first startled him, had become an inseparable part of the land, the horses, and the people who called the territory home. Nathaniel watched her from the porch as she helped a group of children line up to practice writing letters in the dust, her laughter ringing like wind chimes in the morning sun. He realized something profound. She hadn't just transformed the ranch, she had transformed him. The quiet life he once craved now seemed hollow compared to the vibrancy she brought. That afternoon, after tending the herd and checking fences together, Mara turned to him with a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Nathaniel, race you to the mesa again?" He grinned, shaking his head. "You never stop, do you?" "Never," she admitted with a shrug, tugging her reins. "But I wouldn't want to." Together they rode, their horses' hooves drumming against the dry earth, dust swirling like golden mist. But this time, the race was different. There were no storms, no threats, no need to prove courage or skill. This was a celebration of life, of partnership, and of love that had grown stronger with each challenge. When they reached the top, the sun hanging low in the western sky, Nathaniel pulled Mara close, feeling the warmth of her body and the steady beat of her heart. "I once wished for calm," he said softly, voice carried by the wind. "But what I have now is better than anything I could have imagined." Mara looked up at him, eyes shining with a mixture of amusement and affection. "Better than calm?" "Better than calm," he confirmed, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. "Because you've taught me that happiness isn't about controlling life or even controlling people. It's about accepting them, riding the storms together, and embracing the wild moments." Mara laughed softly, leaning into him. "I suppose the West has lessons for all of us," she said. "Some more thrilling than others." Nathaniel nodded, feeling the truth of it deep in his chest. "And the best lessons are learned together." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky ablaze with amber, rose, and violet, the ranch settled into a peaceful quiet. The herd grazed calmly, the children played by the corral, and the foreman leaned against the barn, shaking his head with a smile. Life, finally, felt in balance. Later, as Mara sat on the porch writing in her notebook, Nathaniel approached with a small, folded piece of parchment in his hand. "I've been thinking," he said, offering it to her. She opened it to find a map of the ranch, with notes marking where they might plant new crops, build a small orchard, and even expand the schoolhouse for more children. "I want to build this life with you," Nathaniel said. "Not just today or tomorrow, but for all the days the West gives us. Your spirit, your courage, your wildness is what makes this home complete." Tears glimmered in Mara's eyes. She folded the map and pressed it to her chest. "And I want to ride every sunrise, every storm, every challenge with you. You've shown me that a partnership isn't about quiet compliance. It's about trust, respect, and love. That's the kind of life I want." Nathaniel took her hand, holding it firmly, feeling the strength, warmth, and life pulsing through her. "Then let's promise," he said, "to face the West together, no matter what comes. To ride side by side through storms and sunshine alike." Mara nodded, her smile radiant. "Side by side," she echoed. The desert air cooled as twilight deepened, the sky littered with stars that had guided countless travelers before them. Nathaniel and Mara sat together on the porch, watching their land, their home, and their future stretch endlessly before them. For the first time, Nathaniel understood that a quiet bride had never been the goal. The West had given him a woman who was bold, brave, and alive, a wild darling who challenged him, inspired him, and made every day an adventure worth living. And Mara realized that a partner who truly respected her spirit, her ideas, and her courage was worth more than any calm, predictable life she could have imagined. Together, they laughed softly, talked about plans for the coming seasons, and let the night settle around them. Life would continue to throw storms their way. Cattle would spook and challenges would arise, but now they had learned the greatest lesson of all: love, respect, and partnership make even the wildest ride worth it. The West was vast, untamed, and full of possibilities, and so was their life together, hand in hand. Nathaniel and Mara watched the stars emerge over the mesas, knowing that this was the dawn of a lifetime spent side by side, wild and free, yet completely at home in each other's hearts.